Say hello and welcome. My name is Shannon. My pronouns are they, them. And today we have a restorative practice um, focusing on sitting with our shit. This is my birth month. This is the time of year where I feel like I'm gearing up for a reset. So for me, a lot of this is just kind of let's sit with what we need to sit with so that we can let it go and we can move in to the next part of the year, kind of letting go of whatever we need to shed and making space for whatever it is we want to welcome in, whatever we want to kind of embrace about the remainder of the year and into next year. So, what does that look like in our practice today? We'll start with grounding, and then we'll be coming into our prop supported postures and running through a small body scan, kind of allowing anything that we need to come up, and acknowledging it. And letting ourselves kind of sit with whatever it is that we need to sit with. And then we'll let it go. We'll move to the next posture and start all over again. Now, the great thing about yoga is that it meets you where you are. So if this is not your vibe today, that is okay. We can still come through the practice and we can practice whatever aspects feel good for us. I am basically here to facilitate options, but it's always your practice. You always have the agency to do whatever it is you need to do. So I'll be offering several options for each posture. If you don't want to do the body scan, you don't have to do the body scan. They're just being offered. So choose what works for you. And we're going to start with a grounding. So if you can find a comfortable position for you, you might want to be reclined. If you're comfortable being reclined, you might like a pillow or blanket beneath the knees. You can cover yourself with a blanket. Sometimes we can use a folded blanket underneath the head for a pillow, if that's something that feels comfortable for us. Or, of course, we can remain in a seated position if that's what suits us. So I'll give everyone a moment to find the position that works for them. I'm going to stay seated because it's easier for y'all to hear me when I'm speaking directly to the camera. But feel free to do what works best for you. And once we find that position, we might start by taking a few deep breaths. If it's helpful for us, we might breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Maybe releasing with a sigh or vocalization. Doing our best to let go of the day so far. And when we've taken as many of these breaths as we need, we might make our way back to our natural breath, whatever that looks like for us. And as we continue to breathe, we might take a moment to notice the space that we're in. We might notice the sounds of the space that we're in. I know where I am. I'm in an urban environment, so you might hear sirens or talking or any host of audio stimuli. So that might be coming through your speakers. But you probably also have sounds in your own space that you can become acquainted with. And if we like, we can close our eyes or find a soft gaze. We'll take a few moments to notice those spaces that are making contact with the object that we're sitting or resting against. We might notice how gravity settles into these spaces, kind of helping us rest against the object. And we might notice the contact between ourselves and this object. And on our next exhale, we might let ourselves be heavy, resting against the support, not just of the object that we're resting against or any props we might be resting against, but through that, through the mat, through the floor, all the way down into the earth below, no matter how far beneath us it is today. Allowing ourselves to rest against the unconditional support of the earth below. We might visualize this space, visualize the softness of the earth, but also the firmness underneath it, the bedrock, the foundation. And this might certainly serve as a physical foundation for us. But through this physical foundation, we can also find connection. Not just connection to the earth, but connection to those we care for and those who care for us. Our friends, our family, our chosen family. No matter how far apart we are today, we are all resting upon the same earth. It doesn't just connect us through distance or through space, but it also connects us through time. We rest upon the same earth as our ancestors. We rest upon the same earth as the original stewards of the land. We rest upon the same earth as the founders of our cultural and spiritual traditions. And all of these relationships to people past, present, and even future are part of our foundation. Our personal foundation, which allows us to build upon it, to rest upon it. And today I invite you to take what you need from this foundation, from these relationships, from these learnings, these teachings. Whether that is support, whether that is rest, whether that is hope, that those who build on what we've done will be able to build even further. Whatever it is, we can take that today. And when we're ready, we might bring awareness into the body again. We might notice our inhale and exhale. We might take a moment to notice if there's anywhere that we need to be particularly cautious or careful with today. Or alternately, anywhere that maybe feels like it needs to move or stretch. And we'll make note of all of these different needs so that we can be as kind to ourselves as possible today. And when we're ready, we might start to introduce a little bit of movement through the fingers, the toes, the head and neck. If there is anywhere that feels like we need to move or stretch, we can offer that to ourselves now. And we're going to transition into our first asana. So this will be a reclined asana. If you are not comfortable being reclined, you can stay seated, and I'll also demonstrate a seated option as well. But if you are comfortable reclined, you might want to move a bolster or blanket that is from underneath the knees off to the side. If you're covered with a blanket, you can feel free to keep that blanket on. So when we're ready, if we're reclined, on our inhale, we might reach the arms up overhead, take a nice long stretch. And on our exhale, we might bring the arms and legs towards the right side of the body, coming into a bit of a crescent moon shape. If we're seated, we might bring the right hand down to our right side, either onto a block or directly on the mat. Reach the left arm up and over towards the right side. We'll continue to breathe, maybe noticing the sensation of the breath in the posture. We might bring the awareness outward, noticing how the body feels in this position. We might notice the state of the mind in this position. And if nothing kind of pops out for us, that's okay too. We can also just enjoy being here. If we're seated, we might bring the left hand back towards the left side. If we're reclined, on our inhale, we might stretch back out straight, finding length through the arms, through the legs, taking any movement we need here. And when we're ready, on our exhale, bringing the arms and legs towards the left side this time, coming into crescent again. If we're seated, we'll ground down through the left hand, reach the right arm up and over towards the right side. Continuing to breathe. Again, noticing if there's any difference in the breath on this side versus the opposite side. If any new thoughts, feelings, or emotions come up for us. Or if nothing at all does. When we're ready, if we're seated, we might reach the right arm up, back towards the right side. If we're reclined, we might, on our next inhale, straighten. Take one last big stretch. And release the arms down to the sides. If we like, we can gently begin to roll onto the right or left side. And when we're ready, we might slowly begin to press up into a seated position so we can transition to our next posture. So we have two choices for our next posture. Our first option would be child's pose, which you'll have a few variations of to choose from. And if you're not a fan of any variation of child's pose, no worries. I'll also be offering a supported wide-legged forward fold. So if you are a fan of child's pose, you have a few different ways that we can come into this. The first is to bring our bolster against the ground, lengthwise. If you want a little bit of softness underneath the knees, you can also open up a blanket near the base of the bolster. If this tends to be a little low for you, you can also stack your blocks beneath your bolster. So this is going to reduce the amount of pressure on the heart space and head. So especially if you have larger thighs, larger bum, and they kind of press together, higher up may be more helpful. So this is the second option for child's pose. And the third, which is my favorite, is using our blocks. If we don't have blocks, we can stack our throw pillows or other pillows beneath to create a ramp. So we have one block in the highest position, one in the lowest, and we're creating this ramp. So let me demonstrate here. Regardless of the position of our bolster, we might find ourselves in tabletop over our bolster. We're going to bring the knees as far apart as is comfortable. Maybe the toes are touching. And then we'll begin to lower down onto our bolster. So we can wrap our arms around the bolster. If we have our ramp, we can wrap them maybe through or around our blocks. We can rest on one cheek or our forehead. If you're chilly, you can have your blanket over your shoulders. And there we have child's pose. If child's pose is not your thing, we have supported wide-legged forward fold. So if you like, you can grab your blanket, put it around your shoulders like a cape. We can either use our bolster, standing it upright. We'll rest our forehead against the top, hinging at the hips. Or, my favorite option, we can bring our blocks down in front of us, rest our bolster across the top to create a table that we can rest against. If you don't have a bolster, but you do have blocks, you can stack blocks on top of each other and use them the same way as demonstrated for the bolster. So I'm going to bring my belly between my legs, bring my legs out nice and wide, hinge forward at the hips. I can rest my arms against my table, I can stack my fist, whatever I need to do. And on our exhale, release into the posture, whatever posture it is that we are currently in. We'll take a few deep breaths here. Again, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth if that's helpful. Allowing ourselves to be heavy. Allowing gravity to pull us into the posture rather than trying to press or form ourselves into it. finding our natural breath. And we'll take a few moments to scan through the body here. We might begin to notice the lower half of the body, noticing the feet, the legs, the hips, moving into the butt or glutes, in through the belly, the low back, allowing whatever comes up to comes up, acknowledging these things before moving on to the next part of the body. So continuing upward into the torso, into the heart space. We might wrap around the sides of the body, under the arms, through the mid and upper back. We might notice the shoulders, the arms, from shoulder to wrist. We might notice the hands, the palms, traveling back through the shoulders into the neck and throat, and then moving upward into the head. Taking a moment to notice how the body feels as a whole. And we'll be here for the next 3 minutes. When we're ready, we'll slowly begin to come back to the breath. Noticing the inhale and exhale. To exit from either child's pose or supported forward fold, we can bring our hands beneath the shoulders, whether against the floor or against the prop, and slowly begin to press up. From child's pose, we can make our way into a seated position as we begin to set up for our next posture. So for our next posture, we'll be coming into a, prone tree or supine tree, depending on how comfortable we are. So if we like to be on our belly, if we feel more comfortable in that position, then we can come into prone tree. For that, we might want a bolster or pillow near the top of the mat. If we are not as comfortable on our belly and would prefer to be reclined, then we can come into a reclined position. Either way, we might want one of our blankets off to the, let's say the right side of the mat, depending on where you are. That might look different. And then we, of course, can use our second blanket to cover ourselves with if we are cold or want to keep the muscles warm. A lot of the times with restorative postures, keeping the muscles warm can help us get a little bit deeper into the posture if that's something that we're interested in. Or if we're just chilly and we're heading into that season. So feel free to cover yourself if you like. I am going to come into the prone or belly down position, but as I mentioned, if you'd prefer to be reclined, feel free to do that. So if we're reclined, we'll lie flat on our back. If we are going to be on our belly, then we will rest on our bellies. As I mentioned, I have a pillow or a bolster or even sometimes a block at the top so that I can rest my head against the object, because on my belly I have quite a large belly and it takes up space, and that means that my head will be left hanging. So having something to support me is really helpful. If you're reclined and you would like support, if you have like a bed pillow, feel free to use that as well. So as I come into my position, I'm going to start by sliding the right knee upward so that it's near parallel with the hip. So that might look different for everybody. We want to be in a position that feels sustainable, that feels comfortable. And after we start to hold this position for a while, if we want, we can always raise the knee into that near parallel position. So when we're ready, if we like, we can bring the foot in towards the body to create that kind of tree shape. Or we can let the foot kind of rest where it rests. It really just depends on how our body's feeling in the moment. And then we'll relax against the support of the mat, the support of the floor. If we're on our belly, we might like to have our hands beneath our head. We can rest either on the left cheek, or if we like, we can rest against the forehead. Whatever is most comfortable for us. If we're reclined, obviously we can feel free to turn the head towards one or the other sides if that feels good. Or we can look straight up towards the ceiling. Once we found our position, if we like, we can take a deep breath. Again, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth, releasing with a sigh or vocalization. Allowing ourselves to be heavy. Allowing ourselves to rest against the support of not just the floor, but the earth. We can tap into those foundations again, taking what we need. And we might begin to notice the lower half of the body. From the feet to the knee, from the knee to the hip, we might notice the glutes or bum, the rest of the pelvis and hips. We might notice the low back, the belly, continuing up into the torso. The heart space, the upper back. We might notice the shoulders, the arms, the hands, the neck and throat, the head. And we might notice the whole body within the posture. We'll be here for the next 3 minutes or so. When we're ready, we'll return to the breath, noticing the inhale and exhale. When we're ready, we can release the left leg, sliding it down to meet the right. If we are on our belly, we might bring the hands beneath the shoulders, pressing through tabletop. Maybe bringing the sit bones back towards the heels for just a moment to round the spine. And then coming to a seated position. If we're reclined, we might roll onto the right or left side. Slowly pressing up into seated. Offer a few options for our final resting position tonight. So if we like, we can come into Shavasana, of course. We always have that option. Maybe again, bolster blanket beneath the knees, covered with a blanket. Maybe eye pillow if you have available. Anything to be more comfortable. I'd also like to offer a supported Shavasana, which is creating our ramp once again, with our high and our low, or stacking smaller pillows, our bolster against that. And we can recline, bringing our bum to the base of the ramp, recline backwards so that we are semi-reclined, but we don't have to be completely against the floor, if that's more comfortable for us. I'd also like to offer supported Baddha Konasana, or butterfly. So we can have the bolster lying directly against the mat, or we can have it in this supported position. Either way, if we have it resting directly against the mat, we'll be in a soft back bend. If we'd rather have a neutral spine, then I would go with this supported variation, or you can rest directly against the mat with no bolster at all. So I'm going to use a supported variation. So I'm going to bring my bum right here to the base. And if we want a little extra softness underneath the knees, I'm going to take one of my blankets and roll it into a long cylinder and place this just underneath my knees. And then I can take my other blanket to cover myself with. I like to open it all the way up and tuck the ends around my feet, because I'm going to bring the soles of the feet together, knees apart, for my butterfly or Baddha Konasana. And by tucking my blanket around my feet, that helps kind of hold the feet together so I don't have to do quite as much work. And then I'll slowly begin to recline back against the support of my bolster. Or against the support of the mat itself. From here, we have a few different options for the hands. We can have them down to the sides, palms down. We can put the palms up if we want a little bit more heart opening. Or we can bring the arms into more of a T shape if we want even more heart opening. So once we found our position, we'll start by taking a few deep breaths here, in through the nose, out through the mouth, if that helps. Allowing again ourselves to connect through the support all the way down into the earth. Especially in our Baddha Konasana, we might also take a moment to notice the heart space in the shoulders and see if we can find a bit of softness in that area. Allowing ourselves to open up a little bit more if that's what we feel is helpful today. And we'll take a few moments here to notice the entirety of the body. Noticing if there's any parts of the body that feel particularly cozy or that maybe need a moment to warm or need a little bit more support, and we can offer ourselves that support by adjusting our blankets, our bolster, whatever it is we need. And we'll find our natural breath, whatever that looks like. Once again, we'll check in, noticing the feet, the legs, the hips and glutes, the pelvis. We'll move into the torso, noticing the belly, the low back, continuing upward through the ribs, into the heart space and the upper back. Letting our arms rest heavy as we notice the sensation in these spaces. Moving into the shoulders, the neck, throat, face, head. We might take a deep breath in, filling the body with air from the top of the head, down to the feet, out to the fingertips. And on the exhale, we'll let go. We'll let go of anything that we don't need to carry with us. That might be stress, the weight of other people's opinions, self-judgment, anything at all. And we'll take space in this moment to breathe. As we are, knowing that as thoughts come into the mind, we can acknowledge them and then release them again. And if at any point we start to get carried into a thought, which is normal, we might bring our attention back to the breath or a particular sensation in the body to help ourselves find ourselves being present. We'll be here for the next 5 minutes or so. When we're ready, we might slowly begin to notice the breath, noticing the inhale and exhale. If we are comfortable where we are, we of course can stay here. We might begin to notice the sounds of the space around us, the scent in the air, and the sensation of the body against the mat or props. If our legs are in Baddha Konasana, we can feel free to stretch the legs out. Maybe slowly introducing movement through the fingers, toes, hands, and wrists. Maybe through the head and neck. If we are using our ramp, we might slowly begin to press up. If we are lying on our backs or on our bolster, we might slowly begin to roll off to the right or left side. Taking any movements that feel comfortable here. From wherever we are, if we like, we can bring the hands to heart center, or we can place them anywhere against the body that feels good. And we might take a few breaths together in a way that's comfortable for us. We'll take a moment to thank ourselves for making space, for rest. And I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your practice with me tonight.